Okay, let's start this up then, since we had some technical glitches. Um, we're not even going to mess with switching back and forth with the cameras, because who knows what'll go wrong with that. Let's start this up then. All right. I'll pop my chat up on my phone. And I'll watch for comments on there. All right, so let's get started then, since we seem to be working okay. I think it might just be an issue with my OBS software sending it out through YouTube. I usually use Facebook, so there'll still be a delay from when I say something and when you guys can comment, but so I'll just keep track of the comments. So if you have any questions or stuff, this time I'm going to try to get right to the fun stuff right away, so we have some time for some questions and whatever, but hopefully everybody has something to draw on, sketchbooks or whatever. So what I wanted to do today, like I said, it's a frustration-free drawing, and I think anybody that draws, I guess it's true for any kind of art, so writing, art, painting, sculpture, whatever it is you're doing, you're always going to get frustrated with it, especially with with what you see in your head is not what's coming out, and that's something I've always struggled with. So when you're young and you're a kid, you usually end up scribbling out your drawing and crumpling it up and throwing it out, and I went through a ton of that, snapping pencils and all the good stuff. So what you have to do over time is, obviously you practice and you train, you get better, but you keep getting frustrated. You have to figure out ways to get around that, to kind of move past it, or at least just deal with it. And now there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's a lot of good videos out there by the artists on a lot of ways that work. The main one being that obviously just get up and walk away. That works for anything, especially for drawing. And it does work. You get up, go do something else, relax, and then you can come back to it later. The problem I had with that was the frustrations could still be there. If I was trying to draw in a Marvel Comics style, I'd still get frustrated. Captain America wasn't coming out like a John Romita Jr. drawing, and I get frustrated again right away. So I'd always been looking for a way that, best of both worlds. You could deal with the frustration, but at the same time you could still create. So what I'm going to show you right now is something I didn't come up with. I think if you've seen some of my work, I'm a big Tim Burton fan, and I've read every interview he's ever done. In one of his interviews, he talked about being very frustrated that with his style of drawing, what he was drawing wasn't exactly what he wanted it to be. And he does have a very rough and loose style. And he talked about one time sitting on a park bench, and he had just gotten so frustrated. They said, "You know what? I'm just not gonna draw with his hands anymore." And he switched hands. So I think he was a left-handed, so he put the pencil in his right hand. And immediately he noticed something really kind of cool. Obviously he couldn't draw as well with his other hand. However, that part of his brain that kept telling him this is not good, this is not what it's supposed to be, had just shut off. And it sounded too good to be true at first, and I said, well, I'll try it. My first thought was that, well, if I start drawing, I'm left-handed, if I start drawing with my right hand, I'm just going to get even more frustrated because I can't draw with that hand. And what I found out was, well, yeah, obviously I'm not going to be able to pull off a Mike Mignola Hellboy with my right hand. However, what happens is you're able to just draw. That part of your brain, the inner critic, just shuts off. And it's like a physical response. Whereas before my last live stream, we talked about writing, how I said to get around that critic, You know, it's a conscious effort. You have to constantly just not worry about spelling, not worry about grammar, and just write. Whereas with this, because you're actually tricking your brain, switching hands, it's really kind of a really weird sensation. So that's what we're going to do right now. So if you have a sketch pad, I'm going to go into my Photoshop. And if you are left-handed, switch to your right hand. Let me grab a brush. So I'm switching now. My cursor, see, I can't, I'm using my right hand. It's even hard to select the brush tool, but that's okay. So I'm just going to use a small brush here. I'm going to make it as close to like a ballpoint pen. So the other thing I like to do when I use this technique, again, it's really feels really weird because this is not the hand that I normally use. So we're going to use a ball pointy nib here. A little bit of orange. Now the fun part is when you start doing this, don't think about something to draw. Just start letting your hand move. Because you're not supposed to know how to draw with this hand. So your brain right now, all of a sudden, doesn't think it's drawing. It's not paying attention. So it doesn't think you're trying to draw, so it's not going to sit there and tell you that this is terrible, oh my gosh, this is awful. And you don't really have to care about what's coming out of this. And that's kind of the fun. You just move it around and just kind of enjoy that kind of weird feeling that you don't, it's almost like someone else is channeling through you and moving your hand because you have so little control over it. And then you just keep making shapes. And as you go, too, because these are going to be such foreign shapes because you have no control of them, you don't know what's coming, you yourself can sit here like a spectator watching, and you can kind of look at these shapes and go, ooh, that looks like that, ooh, that looks like that. And your hand can go over and develop some of those lines into something else. And then maybe here I'm starting to see some, maybe these are legs for something. And this almost looks like they have some sort of tutu or skirt on or something. And it's really, I haven't actually used this technique in Photoshop. I usually like to do this in my notebook. So obviously you don't use this for finished art. You could and give yourself a really unique style. But what this is great for is when you're developing characters for a book or for strips. And you want to have a loose feel, or in one of the cases, and I'll show you an example later, I had written a book, well, my son came up with the idea for a book called Monster Chefs. So it was one of the easiest books I came up with because he came up with a story when he was 4. I just had to shape it into a story, and I thought, wow, this is going to be the easiest job ever. And I went through drawing the story and the monsters, and it just wasn't working. And I ended up having to scrap an entire picture book of art. The entire thing finished. It wasn't just roughs. It wasn't just pencils. It was finished art. And I scrapped all of it. And I actually used this technique to then recreate the monsters and the feel of the book. And I'll show you that in a minute. So over here, and when you do this too, what's kind of wild is if you try to control it too much, like you start to say, ooh, I want to draw an arm here. You'll feel everything stop almost. So it kind of forces your brain to stop thinking. The second you try to turn it into something and start trying to draw like you would with your dominant hand, you're going to feel like your brain turn on and go, what are you doing? And that's exactly when you want to just go back to making shapes and just letting the pen move. And I'm doing it just like I would in my notebook because you can't erase in the notebook. You just kind of keep piling up lines. And these shapes, that might be seeing some eyes there. And maybe this is a hand or something up here. Or this might be maybe that could possibly be a bird sitting on his hand. I think that's what that might be. So, I don't know if you guys are drawing along. I wish we could do this on Zoom so I could see what you guys are doing. But again, the key is just letting it happen. And this is a complete scribble, complete fun. And then try to make yourself say, ooh, I think that's a hand. Try to draw a hand. You'll see exactly what happens. You'll feel that brain kick in, and then all of a sudden you lose that flow. You just want to keep that hand moving. Oh, see, now I got some squiggles. This could end up being hair up here, or maybe a hat. Who knows? But I kind of like the general shape, where you can see around here, it looks like there's some sort of ballet skirt. And there's some legs here. This is probably an arm. And I think this is an arm with a finger and a bird. And the face is in here somewhere. And this will probably be ending up being some hair or some hat or something. Pretty sure this is going to be some sort of kind of monster. Now what you can do, I'm going to do on here, is I like to do this too. I have a multi-pen for sketching that has a bunch of different colors. So what I like to do is just switch colors. On this, I'm just gonna, I haven't done this again in Photoshop. I know with the ballpoint pens, you switch colors, starts to look really cool when you go over it with the other color. So what I'm gonna do is just start drawing new lines over this in those areas that I see some shapes. And again, I'm not trying to make it. I'm just drawing more lines over these other lines. Now I can see them because they're in a different color. So now as I draw these lines, I'm going to be able to see different shapes and maybe see where this figure is going more. Yeah, I think this is going to be some sort of clown monster with a tutu on. His nose, this is some sort of nose. He's probably going to have a mouth here with a bunch of teeth and some eyes. And that's definitely going to be a hand with a bird perched on there. There we go. Now, again, you can come back to this later, and then you can refine it. You can trace over it. You can go back to your dominant hand and then just kind of put some finishing touches on it. Throw some watercolor washes on it to get more random shapes on it. But what I'm going to do right now is actually start up another one. And this time, I'm going to increase my brush size. And then again, same thing with my right hand. It's awkward enough with a pen. It's very awkward when you do this with a tablet in your lap, and I'm not used to that because now I'm also looking at how the cursor is responding to the tablet. But now I've got a thicker brush. And now, same thing. I'm just going to let my hand move, and I'm just going to let the shapes build up. And this time, last one was more scribbly. This time I'm just going to keep laying down these shapes, building some up, get some in the center here, and see if I start to see something. Now the other good thing about this is, because my critic part of my brain is shut off, I don't have that part of my brain that's telling me, ugh, this is nothing, this is not going anywhere. It doesn't matter. I can either just move on to another one, or in the case of Photoshop, I can just delete this layer and start another one. Because again, my brain right now doesn't realize I'm trying to draw. And this is starting to look like maybe it could be some sort of mech, sort of spider mech, maybe, possibly. And as you think about these things, again, I'm not trying to control the lines. Subconsciously, sometimes now you can see I'm starting to draw like almost like spider legs. So I think this would be some sort of ghost in the shell type of turret. Got a turret up there. And again, the cool thing is my mind, it's just me talking these things. My brain, my imagination is not even really trying to figure this out. It's off. So I can have a TV on. I can have whatever else going on. It's completely random. It just gets a little awkward when you're trying to select tools like this. And again, I'm going to just take another color and start just putting some more funky lines over the top. and see where these shapes go. And yeah, this is looking like it could be some sort of mech device. Now the cool thing is I'm building up shapes that I don't know what they are, whereas if I'm drawing with my left hand and trying to build a figure, I know what kind of shapes I'm going for. And if I'm drawing, say, a rib cage structure, the problem is I know when it's off when I'm trying to draw that, because I know what I'm trying to draw. And I know what a rib cage looks like. I've practiced it enough times, and so I know when it's off. I know when the left side is a little bit askew or whatever. And then obviously you can go down that rabbit hole of trying to fix it, still not looking right because there's another piece. That's where you get the frustration. Here, these shapes, I don't know what they're going to be yet. I could go in later with my left hand and do a whole bunch of little micro detailing and turn it into a really cool mech. But right now, there's no frustration because I don't know what these shapes are supposed to be. This could be some spider robot legs. This could be a turret up here. Might turn it into something else. Who knows? But it just, there's no frustration, there's no anxiety building up in my head. Because a lot of where that anxiety does come from is sometimes we tend to place some of our worth on the art we create. So that if my drawing is not good, that means I'm not good. It means, you know, my talent's not good. And that's not true, and we know it's not true, but that's just how the brain works when you're self-critiquing. That's why if you're able to shut that off, you can do stuff like this. Because I can always go in later and then start drawing over these shapes. And yeah, I think this would be a fun one for a spider mech. But let me give you an example. So I couldn't find the original sketches I had for my monster chefs, but like I was saying, I had finished the artwork for the entire picture book, and it just didn't work. And that's a normal thing too. Even with my work now that I'm working on, I could always redo it. So you just got to get to a point where you're happy enough. You're like, this is still good. Of course I can improve it, but this technique really helped me because I knew I wanted monster chefs to be loose. I wanted the drawings to feel more alive and frenetic, and I was getting my drawings that I had done were too tight. So in this case, I'm still using my right hand. This is really tricky here. So this is the style I ended up coming up with. And so again, instead of just if I had drawn this monster with my left hand, like I had the original, he came out a little bit comic bookish, a little superhero-ish, a little too muscular. So what I did was just took a ballpoint pen and did what we just did with that drawing exercise, which was to that's a little res there, sorry. But I just sketched these monsters with my right hand. So they were a bit of a mess. The shapes were all over the place. But they were shapes that I would not have come up with had I drawn it with, you know, in this case here with one of my favorite chefs. I wouldn't have come up with these tentacles coming out of the back of his head and the shoulders coming up above the head. So he's got this kind of slouched appearance. That was purely accidental from just that exercise we were just doing. His face just came out of the lines in that area. That was all. And because I didn't have much control, he ended up having the thick legs. And the tentacles came from it being, obviously, like you saw my first doodle there. So when we drew this guy, those tentacles, I had no plans to make them with those tentacles. It just came out of a doodle like this. And I'm like, ooh, those could be tentacles. And sure enough, it worked out. He became my favorite character in the book. And now it also comes, you can be more targeted with it. So in the books I'm illustrating right now, which are middle grade novels, but I'm also illustrating them. I've got full page illustrations. And this is where I can get super frustrated because I would love to spend 3 illustration and put in micro details and make it insane. That's how I like to work, but I would never get it done. So at the same time, what I do is I just kind of rely on a manga style, doing a lot with a little bit of gray washes and things like that. But even then, certain parts of the illustration, let me turn on one that I worked on. So here's part of a scene. So this is the book goes from text, so you'll be reading, and then some pages are just illustrations. So this will be a 2-page spread, and so I was fairly happy with the background, but I couldn't get the character running down the dock to work. So what I did was, these all start off as sketches in my sketchbook, and I scan them in and then do the finishes over the top of that. I went back to my sketchbook, and you can see this little sketch right here. So I just built that up with my right hand. I knew the pose, and I just started drawing lines in the shape and the direction that I wanted the character going. And so slowly, the character came out in a much better pose than I had come up with. And then what I'm able to do is do the finished illustration over that. So you can see now this is Pimoa running down the deck. And so instead of me just redrawing with my left hand and trying to fix the anatomy and fix that, I just said, you know what, just get the sketchbook out, switch to my right hand. I kind of know the pose. The lines become freer. I'm not thinking, oh, his legs are too long or his head's too big. I'm just getting the pose that I want down, and it becomes more alive so that the characters are less stiff, which is a big problem I've had with this project. The art became very, very stiff. So using this technique that I just showed you, I was able to overcome that frustration of the characters looking stilted because I was trying to get the anatomy right, or I was trying to be too realistic. I default back to kind of my comic book style of drawing, and I wanted this to be a little more cartoony and loose. So there's a lot of that, and the same with this background. I do a lot when I draw these big cities. There's a lot of detail to put in. The way I sketch them out super quick is, again, that same technique we just did. I literally sit down on my notebook with my right hand and just start scribbling a basic city, and I'll get a pretty kind of cool form, and then I'll scan that in, and I'll kind of clean it up a little and see which lines kind of work and don't work. So that's how stuff like little things like this little crane right here come about. It's just little random scribble that went off, and then when you look at it later, you're like, ooh, that could be a little crane, and it's on the dock, so it makes sense. And that's how you come up with little details on the buildings like this. And I'm not thinking. Some of it's looking at reference, but a lot of it is just from having doodled it with my right hand, not thinking. And then later on, I can see those shapes in there. And that's too in a lot of the cityscapes. Let's see if I can move these guys around. If there's more of the city over here. That's how I come up with. This one's not as over the top. This is more traditional. But some of the cityscapes in this book are kind of weird and funky. And the way I do that is, again, the same technique, using my right hand. So my brain shut off, doesn't know I'm drawing, and you come up with a lot of random squiggles that you can then turn into different building tops. So just like this guy might end up becoming a spider mech. I don't know. When I come back and look at it, I might decide it could be something completely different. But I just wanted to share this one technique. I mean, there's obviously other techniques, yes. Getting up and walking away is a good one to deal with frustration. Obviously, too, constantly just doing anatomy drills, drawing anatomy, drawing architecture, working on perspective, focusing on these little pieces of the craft to improve. That helps alleviate frustration because you get better. But what I wanted to share is the number one thing. Again, I just discovered this from a Tim Burton interview. Something that was very different that I'd never seen before, and it completely shuts off my brain and allows me, instead of walking away, I still get to draw and come up with kind of cool and weird doodles, which is, honestly, that's my favorite style of drawing. So now I think we're getting close to the time. So I did want to, I know last time I didn't leave a ton of time for questions, so let this audio catch up, and then if anybody has any questions, just start typing them in to the chat box. I gotta wait for the chat box to catch up, and then there we go. Okay, so Chris Hant is saying, do I take requests? Requests What do you want me to doodle something? Sure, I can try to doodle up something fast. If it's gonna be fast and in specific, I'm gonna probably have to switch back to my left hand. And any reference used for that city? It's full of energy. Awesome, thank you. That's exactly what I was going for. Yes, it could be. The detailing is where I can. I mean, like I said, I could just spend a week on one illustration. My main inspiration for the cities in the Conjurer's books was the State Fair, the Chicago World's Fair, in 18. I'm blanking on the year, but it was called. I believe it was called the White City. But I found pictures of it online years ago, and I became infatuated with it. So the main reason being was because there was different types of architecture next to each other, and that's exactly so. The city in my books has, because you're going to have magicians from all different parts of the world building the city at the same time next to each other. You're going to have different types of architecture next to each other. So I did use a lot of photo reference so I would have architecture from China, and then I would get some architecture from Romania, and then just have that juxtaposed in the same. So one building will be from one part of the world, another building will be influenced by another part of the world, just to convey how the city was built and how it. So through the drawings, you can tell the history, visually tell the history of the city. And that, honestly, that was one of the funnest parts of getting to draw the book, was do the city scenes. And in the book I just finished illustrating book 2. It's got a lot of architecture. Let's see, I'm not sure if that audio is caught up yet, so I'm still waiting for responses on the requests. See if this is. $18.93. Thank you, Chris. Yes, it is a. Gene Wilder narrated a great documentary on it too, which has a lot of. It's very hard to come by the photographs and stuff. There's not too many. I had one book that I had. It took me forever to track down because it's been out of print forever. That I have on it, and there's a lot of other fascinating history surrounding it too, but that documentary might be on Amazon now, but Gene Wilder did the narration for it, which was fantastic. But yeah, that's kind of what I modeled the city around, because I've always been infatuated with that World's Fair. So it seems like I can turn this volume up on my phone and see if the audio is caught up yet. I'll have to look into that for next time. Streamline that. I don't know if anybody has any experience with OBS software, but or it could just be YouTube that there's a delay, but that didn't really happen on. So we have any other questions coming in on, and again, and then in the next one too, I might work on some other different drawing techniques, but I was hoping to share something unique that you might not have come across. I know I had never come across this technique before, so it was a lot of fun to do. Let me see, why am I... Why is that not refreshing? Alright, so I don't see any other questions popping up. We'll try another quick, and do one more exercise. Now here's a variation of it that we can do. So let's say you're working on character designs or concepts for a children's book or a comic, or whatever it may be. You can, the way we've been doing, the way I'd like to do it is just obviously have that part of the brain completely shut off. It's completely random. Don't know what's coming. What you can do to make it a little more targeted, or you're trying to develop, let's say you were trying to develop, you say, okay, I want to do a book about wolves. So I know I'm going to have wolves. But again, I start trying to draw wolves, they're not coming out right, I get frustrated. So we're going to use this technique, but we do have an idea in mind that we do want to get towards wolves. So again, I'm switching to my right hand, so it's going to be awkward. But because that part of my brain, again, it doesn't know I'm drawing, it's not going to be critiquing how I'm drawing wolves. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off with a line, just a kind of a motion line. I think my tablet has conked out on giving me a tapered line. But that's alright. So what we'll just do is turn down the opacity on it. Alright, so now I'm going to draw. And again, because I don't have control, I'm just letting it go. I know a wolf is going to have a kind of a center line, or it's going to be long. I know they're going to have back legs and some front legs and a head and a snout, pointy ears, a tail. So now, if I was using my left hand, my brain would be going nuts. I'd be going crazy, because it'd be like, there's no way you're ever going to be able to turn this into a decent wolf. But because that part of my brain's not paying attention right now, I'm still relaxed. I'm able to actually talk while I'm drawing. Whereas if this was my left hand, I'd be too kind of thinking about the anatomy of a wolf. So I'm just letting my hand kind of do what it thinks is a wolf, and however it comes out, it comes out. And, oops, I think his ears, okay. So this is almost like spirit writing. The ears now are going to be really, really long. Apparently, that could be the other ear. I'm not sure what it is. That might be his bottom jaw. Who knows? But now, I've got this kind of stylized wolf shape. Again, I can switch colors. I'm having a hard time navigating over here with my right hand. Let's put some purple on top, and we'll go back over it. Again, still with my right hand. Just going to pop it onto a new layer. And same thing. I'm just going to go back into those areas where I see wolf. I'm not really refining them too much because it's still my right hand. But now I know, okay, those are probably two back legs. There's kind of his belly. There's one front leg. And there's no paw in there. It's pointy. Maybe it'll stay that way. Maybe that's kind of a cool design. There'll probably be some teeth in there. There'll be an eye somewhere around here. Ears, again, coming out really long. But he might be interested. It could come out really stylized. Like The Wolves, if you've never read it, but The Wolves and the Walls by Neil Gaiman. And, just blanked on his name. One of my favorite picture books of all time. Dave McKean illustrated it. The wolves in there are awesome. It's also just one of the best picture books ever. So I can keep going over this wolf with another layer or another line with my right hand, getting kind of a cool stylized. Or what you can do now to use this technique for an actual project, turn down the opacity, or again get a piece of tracing paper, and now I'm going to switch to my left hand with a different color, and I'm just going to go in now with my hand. Now the brain's going to switch back on. However, I have this framework, so I'm not starting with, I've got to get the anatomy right and the skeleton right. I'm going to go in and use what I have here as a base to just see what this would look like. So I'm kind of applying a little more accurate anatomy. I'm trying not to. I'm staying to what I did here to see what he kind of would look like. It's almost like one of my favorite things online is where you see those concept artists will take their kids' drawings and render it realistically. It's along the same lines as that. You get a really cool result, because really little kids don't have that critic going on yet. So you get really, really original looking drawing. So this is going to end up being a style that I would never have done on my own. And I kind of like the way he almost looks like a little stuffed animal of sorts. But that's a more targeted approach. And you can use that to design a whole slew of characters. What's this question here? Okay, how do you preserve the original drawings when you want to use this technique over them? Do you redraw them in the sketchbook and then doodle over them? Yeah, so a lot of times this is for concept. So if I want to then take that concept to the next level, I'll take a piece of tracing paper and trace it onto that. And then I can work it from there. Or the shape that I've come up with, if I like the shape of the drawing, I'll redraw that. I'll switch to my left hand and redraw kind of that shape. And that way then I'll work from there. And it's a great way that way you can come up with a lot of kind of cool looking and different characters. And then you can make them, again, if you're trying to draw a more realistic comic, you can push them towards reality or build kind of a skeleton underneath. And another question, have you ever seen the drawing on the right side of your brain book? I have seen that, and I think I read through it a long time. I'm trying to remember. I remember there being some cool exercises in there. Ones that I had used. I think one that I remember off the top of my head that I liked was draw something without looking at your paper. So look at an object, a tree, whatever it is, and draw it without looking down on your paper. It takes a lot of self-control to do it, but it's similar to this because you'll be shutting off your inner critic, and you'll come up with some neat stuff because you can't look at and analyze what you're actually drawing. Have I ever used this technique for penciling a comic? Yes. So if you've seen, I do with the Conjurer's book, I do a companion experimental webcomic on GoComics. If you go to gocomics.com and put in the Conjurers, I did that as a side project because while I was working on the books, which were, taking up all my time, what you'll find is if you work too much on one project, you can actually hurt your creativity because you're just grinding. And so your art, your writing, everything kind of starts to get a little stale. So you always have to have a side project. But I didn't want to take on a side project and take away time from the books. So I thought, what if I had a side project that was based on this project? So I decided to do a webcomic based on the Conjurer's books. So I could take characters from the books and they could have other adventures, or I could tell the backstory of secondary characters. But I made a deal with myself that I couldn't spend a lot of time on it. So I had to limit myself to an hour to do the art. Writing, I could just write out, quick outlines. I don't write too far ahead in the comic. It's very quick. But art-wise, I said it had to be less than an hour. So I actually draw those, and if you look at you'll see it is very loose in the comic. And I actually do the initial pencils, and sometimes some of the finishes I scan in are done with my right hand. And that's how I kept the comic being loose. That's how I was okay with, because if you look at it, I would never, it's stuff I wouldn't want to redo. I would never be okay with that kind of art. But at the same time, because I did that, it has a life of its own, a look of its own, a feel of its own. And I kind of like that. And also I can do it a lot quicker. Oh yeah, high school art teachers are a huge fan of that book too. Reference it all the time. The Right Side of the Brain. Yeah, I think I might even have a copy somewhere. But the one drill that's similar to this that I learned growing up was from How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Was the scribble technique in the book was very similar. So after you spend a lot of time working on anatomy and proportion, you can switch to that technique they showed you in that book where you would just scribble the basic shapes. You wouldn't build your stick figure, then your skeleton, and then your muscles on top of it. You would just start with a loose scribble. So it's similar to that. Okay, so we'll wait for a couple last questions. Let the chat box catch up, so we're just about out of time. Because I know there's a slight delay, so I don't want to miss any. So any last question? Actually, I guess I could type it in, huh? because that'll probably get to you sooner. Make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't see any coming in. But like I said, if you have any other questions or whatever, you can always, find me on Instagram or Facebook or my website, brianandersonwriter.com. Or if you type in theconjurers.com or doggydog.com, they're supposed to point to the same site. It's not always working right, but usually it does. So if you have any more questions or also if you have any ideas on what the next stream, if there's something you'd like to see or in regards to drawing, either comic books, comics, picture books, or on writing again, I could do another one on writing. Just drop me a line wherever you can find me. Instagram, I think I'm Doggy Doug on there. So thanks for tuning in, and hope to see you guys around for the next one. All right, take care. Oh, one last question just came in. The delay. Oh, is that Patrick? Okay. Horror versus superhero. Ooh. I kind of like a combination of both, I guess. I'm more in the Clive Barker camp of horror, where the monsters are usually kind of the ones you end up siding with. But yeah, most of my stuff, I guess you would have to say, is darker, more gothic. That's, I guess, my natural state of drawing. Oh, I do too. I hope that wolf shows up somewhere too. We'll see what happens. It's not as good as the ones as the wolves on the walls, but we'll see where it goes from there. All right. Again, any ideas for future streams or whatever, just find me online, drop me a line. And thanks for tuning in.